Hey guys, we are going to finish up chapter one of Fahrenheit 451 today in this video. Still a lot to talk about though. We're still right in the middle of the Montag and Beatty back and forth. It's really kind of given us some of the themes in this book that if I was going to say, hey, you need to write a paper about this, that there's some great stuff in here that you could use as a jumping off point into a really strong discussion, to be honest. There's a lot of really good stuff here. So, I mean, if you can't tell by the amount of highlighting I'm doing, I mean, there's a lot, okay? So where we picked up, Mildred had just been stormed out of the room because Montag had yelled at her, and Beatty's picking up a new topic, okay? And at times people misunderstand this, so I'm going to go through. I'm going to read this section. I'm going to read this whole paragraph. It's kind of long. I want you to understand, particularly when he talks about minorities, he's not talking about what we always think about, okay? All right, so this is Beatty talking. He says, now let's take up the minorities in our civilization, shall we? Bigger the population, the more minorities. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, the doctors, lawyers, merchants, chiefs, Mormons, Baptists, Unitarians, second-generation Chinese, Swedes, Italians, Germans, Texans, Brooklynites, Irishmen, people from Oregon or Mexico. The people in this book, this play, this TV serial are not meant to represent any actual painters, cartographers, or mechanics anywhere. The bigger your market, Montag, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. All the minor minorities with their navels to be kept clean. Authors full of evil thoughts. Lock up your typewriters. They did. Magazines became a nice blend of vanilla tapioca. Books, so the blank snobbish critics said, were dishwater. No wonder books stopped selling, the critics said. But the public, knowing what it wanted, spinning happily, let the comic books survive. And the three-dimensional sex magazines, of course. There you have it, Montag. It didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with, no. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick, thank God. Today, thanks to them, you can stay happy all the time. You are allowed to read comics, the good old confessions, and trade journals. So he points out that a lot of what caused them to stop writing all these books was that minorities were offended, and we don't mean minorities like ethnic minorities. He was very clear that he meant like things like people who like cats versus dogs and things like that. So you've got all this imagery of people who just might be offended by the smallest things. Now I want to be very careful with this part. All right, I don't want you to think that this is one of those, oh yeah, he's talking about these snowflakes and people getting offended so easy. No, Bradbury's not advocating that you go and say whatever ignorant thing is on your mind and people should just have to deal with it. That's not the point he's making. Not even close, guys. But the point here is remember, Beatty's not the guy we want to base our philosophy on. But he is saying that so many people were getting offended by things that they changed it. And it wasn't so much offended because of people were saying rude things. Just like if you had think about like Law and Order before it comes on, it always has a disclaimer that this is not meant to mimic, real life events, even though we know it is, because you don't want to, offend people. I can't tell you how many times I've seen recently movies that came out with teachers who were bad people in it. They had a movie called Bad Teachers that came out, and I didn't look at that and go, oh my goodness, I'm so offended they're talking about teachers that way, because I don't do that. That's not me. So I was like, what's a good stereotype for some people, but that's not all of us. And that's kind of the part that Bradbury's mentioning here, the fact that people were getting that way. And remember, now Beatty's saying that's why they changed it. He was like, let's just change everything to not reflect anything about society, and that way people don't get offended. But what it did was it made the books completely boring because we want to read about people. We want to read about characters. So when they did that, people quit reading. And then he points out a really important detail that will show up on your test. The government didn't initially ban books. People just quit reading them. And it's really easy to say that's what's happening today too. I mean, bookstores are dying by the dozen, and people are buying probably less and less, but reading still exists, guys. It's not going anywhere. Books still exist. People still buy books. I buy them all the time, and I'm not the only person. I know I'm an English teacher, but lots of people do. I see people in the bookstore all the time. All right, books are not gone. Maybe the physical is starting to fade. More people are reading it, digitally. But the fact is that books still exist. People read more online than they've ever read in the past. So this isn't totally happened. But, in fact, I would think that we've gone the opposite direction here, and books have become more and more trying to be sensational so people will buy them. All right. So not quite what happened, but you can see what Beatty's talking about here. And he's right. I mean, don't offend people if you don't say anything, I guess. So Montag keeps asking questions about the firemen and things like that. And then he points out something that I really bothers me. This is true too, though. Beatty says, since we started turning out more and more athletes and more trade school workers in our schools, you've had less and less intellectuals. And listen to what he says. He says the word intellectual, of course, became the swear word it deserved to be. You always dread the unfamiliar. Surely you remember the boy in your own school classes who was exceptionally bright and did most of the reciting and answering, while the others sat like so many leaden idols hating him. And wasn't it this bright boy you selected for beatings and tortures after hours? Of course it was. We must all be alike, not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal. Each man the image of every other, and then all are happy, for there are no mountains to make them cower or to judge themselves against. Man, he says, like, so what happened was we have all of these athletes and these, blue collar workers, which is nothing wrong with either of those, but you need the intellectuals too. And he says, but we had turned that into a curse word. And he points out to a thing that was in the 50s and still exists today. It's the idea that the smartest kids in the class are typically the ones that get picked on a lot. Now, I'll be proud of Cottage Hill that it's not super bad about that, but I do hear you guys, making fun of people. And a lot of my smartest kids will not answer things in class because of fear of ridicule. And he says Beatty says that's a good thing. We've managed to shut these people up. And why? Because he's got some psychology here that, not to offend anyone, but this is right. A lot of you, when you were asked about the way the media portrays smart people, you talked about they make smart people look like they're more important and blah, blah, blah. That's not what happens. But Beatty points out that they wanted to get rid of these kids because it made the other kids feel bad about themselves. All right. And this is one of the continuing themes in this section, is that people didn't like who they were. So instead of getting better and changing, they decided to punish the people who were. All right. And this is wrong. Okay. Look, if there's a kid in your class who constantly answers questions and gets them right, and it makes you mad, well, you got a couple of options. You can actually do the work yourself and answer questions too, or get over it. I mean, people who are smart don't deserve to be abused over that just because you don't want to feel stupid. Don't be. This is something you have control over. Read the books, do the homework, get help, do everything you can. You'd be amazed how much you can be just like those people and know just as much. But so we see the same thing in other parts of society too. I remember when Tiger Woods was coming up in golf and was so good, and they had to change golf courses. They called them tiger proofing golf courses because he was just so good that they had to change the rules because everybody else wasn't going to win, and that's not okay. You don't punish excellence, and that's one of the issues here. It goes to the whole, and I hate to use this example, but it goes to the whole everybody gets a trophy mentality. You don't want kids to feel bad, so we don't keep score. Guys, that's wrong. It just is. You need to have those things so that we know we have a bar to judge ourselves against and say, do I really care that much about being good at soccer? If so, I need to practice. If I don't, then it doesn't matter to me that if I don't win. So we have to start prioritizing things and then deciding what it is we care about and improving. So if you're a person who's wants to be an electrician, and you're sitting in English class and there's no reason for you to be offended. This doesn't matter for you as far as being able to recite poetry. So you shouldn't be offended when other people do. So, but again, Beatty's not wrong in his statements. They're just the way they're carrying it out is wrong. Okay. He goes on and talks about this a lot, by the way. He talks about the fact that the firemen were the ones who were there to protect everyone else's peace of mind and protect them from intellectuals who would use their smarts against them, which, to be honest with you, that's exactly what people are doing. I mean, Beatty's one of these people who's smart, and he's using this against other people. So completely, wrong. Let's see. Now, this one's kind of key. He says, you must understand that our civilization is so vast that we can't have our minorities upset and stirred. Ask yourself, what do we want in our country above all? People want to be happy. Isn't that right? Now, that's Beatty talking. And again, he's right. If you were to ask people what's the most important thing, when you really get down to it, most of their answers are going to revolve around being happy and being happy with your life and who you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we should have to seek out that happiness and do things to achieve it, not have the world change to mimic what we want. All right. And that's the problem they're having here. Beatty goes on, he says, don't we keep them moving? Don't we give them fun? That's all we live for, isn't it? For pleasure, for titillation. You must admit our culture provides plenty of these. Said, so we're going to keep giving people fun so that they'll be happy, which is a false sense of happiness, by the way. But we're going to give them these things so that they feel like they're happy anyway. And, everybody wins, right? But they don't. That's the problem. If everybody won, you wouldn't be having 9 and 10 people a night trying to kill themselves And that's just in that one area with that one group of that one group of technicians. I mean, obviously people aren't happy if that's the case. Look at our world today. We have every reason to be happy. We have all of these resources. We have all these things. Yet depression's at an all-time high. Suicide's at an all-time high. And with the situation we're in right now, it's only going to get worse. So tell me again that we're all really that happy. Okay. He even points out on one section coming up that anything that makes people unhappy, they're getting rid of, including like funerals. People are unhappy at funerals. He says now their society, as soon as someone's dead, they come pick the body up and they toss it in an incinerator and it's done and you move on. I mean, oh my goodness. Now that's again a dystopian. The idea that, we're going to exaggerate this so far that no one could ever imagine this happening. But then we can go back and think about, ways that we're not so far away from that. All right. He says, man, it's such a Beatty line. He says, forget them. Burn all, burn everything. Fire is bright and fire is clean. Beatty's a crazy person. I'm going to be honest with you. We're going to see this and then later in the end of chapter 2, some of the stuff he says about fire. I have a feeling Beatty just burns stuff for fun all the time. Montag asks about Clarice, and Beatty points out something really important. He says, heredity and environment are funny things. You can't rid yourself of all the odd ducks in just a few years. The home environment can undo a lot you're trying to do at school. That's why we've lowered the kindergarten age year after year until now we're almost snatching them from the cradle. He's saying people like Clarice happen because of their families. There are certain people who don't buy into this system because you have to figure out a way to deal with them, and their way of dealing with them is getting them away from their families as quickly as they can and putting them into some sort of schooling at a super early age so they can keep them separate. Again, that's part of society. It really is. Of course, I think in our society we see more on the other side, that the schools a lot of times are trying to do good things and they're undone frequently at home. But again, Beatty's right. Okay, I want you to understand, Beatty for the most part is right about everything he says. But just because you're right about something doesn't mean your conclusions are correct. Your premises might be. It does not mean the conclusion you derive from it is. And what he's decided is not. Just because there's unhappiness in the world, it doesn't mean you eliminate everything that makes people unhappy. You have to. Happiness is an emotion. We deal with it just like we do sadness. Sadness is an emotion. We deal with it just like we do happiness. Okay. You don't eliminate everything that makes people sad. I apologize if I said happiness a minute ago. We have to process our sadness. We have to process our misery. And that's part of what makes the happy time so happy, is that you have something to gauge them against. And their world, this is why everyone's so empty. They don't have that. They don't have anything to measure their situation against. Beatty is very cold about Clarice. He says it's a good thing she's dead. She's better off dead. Then he goes into, there's this really long paragraph. You see all of this here. He goes into this. It's a really deep section. I'm going to read some sections of it. I realize I'm reading a lot this video. I'm sorry. He's talking about Clarice. He says, luckily, queer ones like her don't happen often. We know how to nip most of it in the bud early. You can't build a house without nails and wood. If you don't want a house built, hide the nails and wood. If you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides to a question to worry him. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. Let him forget there's such a thing as war. If the government's inefficient, top-heavy, and tax-mad, better it be all those things than people worry over it in Montag. Peace, Montag. All right? So he's talking about how let's just remove choices from people, or make them think they have choices, just they really don't. And that's kind of a big thing he's advocating here. Again, I feel like this happens a lot in our world. It's like if you don't want people to be upset, take away the things that would make them upset. Now, I think in a lot of ways that Bradbury did miss on this, because even though this does happen in our world, in a lot of ways we are so surrounded by 24-hour news networks and online news that's constantly up, and your phone continuously dinging to give you new news stories, that I think that we're kind of the opposite of this in a lot of ways, that we're surrounded by many choices. The problem is that we don't take the time to think about them and just gravitate towards whatever everyone else tells us is right. Now, I like this next part. He's talking about giving people contests, like game shows that involve knowledge, and like Jeopardy maybe. He says, cram them, this is still Beatty, cram them full of non-combustible data, chock them so full of facts they feel stuffed, but absolutely brilliant with information. Then they'll feel their thinking. They'll get a sense of motion without moving. And they'll be happy because facts of that sort don't change. Don't give them any slippery stuff like philosophy or sociology to tie things up with. That way lies melancholy. Any man who can take a TV wall apart and put it back together again, and most men can nowadays, is happier than the man who tries to slide, rule, measure, and equate the universe, which just won't be measured or equated without making man feel bestial and lonely. So he's saying, give people a bunch of facts that makes them feel smart. And I think this is something that we see plenty of today, is that people feel like because they can list all the presidents in order, that all of a sudden makes them smarter than the other person. But that makes them good at memorization, and that's true, and that's a skill. But Beatty's saying that it's important to have, or he's saying that they should avoid things that require thinking about things like the universe. It's just because the more you think about the universe, the more you realize how small you are and how alone in some ways you are. And he says, and we don't want that. We want people to be happy. So let's just take that away. But the fact is that we need that other thing too. Guys, we should realize we're small, because then we realize we're not the only thing that matters. And guess what? You're not. We're not. We aren't the only thing that matters. Okay? There are bigger things out there than you and your own problems. Now, that doesn't mean your problems don't matter, but it means that you need to realize there's other things going on and other people struggling too. And when we do that, it does make our problems seem smaller sometimes, and that's important. All right. So Beatty's about to leave. Before he leaves, he tells Montag, "Hey, this is our job, man. We're there to protect the happiness of everyone else." It's a really good manipulative technique. He's basically telling Montag, if you go against this, you want people to be unhappy, and you don't want that, do you? So really, really well designed. He asks Montag if he'll be back in for another shift, and Montag shows hesitance, which disturbs Beatty. Beatty catches that. He knows something's up. He also points out that, hey, look, from time to time, firemen get a little bit curious. They might take a book home with them. We let them keep it for 24 hours. Then they need to burn it. Bring it to me, and we'll burn it, and we move on like nothing happened. If you keep it, though, we're going to come burn you out. So he basically is letting Montag know, hey, look, I know you got a book. Keep it for a little while. Look at it, see how crazy it is. Bring it to me and burn it, and we'll move on with this. He doesn't know how many books Montag actually has, though. We all know he has that one behind his pillow, but like I told you earlier, he's got more hidden. All right? We're about to see that. So Beatty leaves, and we have this really interesting scene with Montag, and there's a lot of other stuff you need to read, by the way. I'm trying to cut down on the length of these videos because I don't want to tell you everything that happened and make you think you don't have to read. There's a really cool discussion about the importance of porches and gardens and why they were removed that you need to read about. But Montag sits with Mildred and finally makes the mistake of showing her he has a bunch of books hidden behind his ventilator grill. So as the chapter closes, he's opened up the grill and brought out all of these books that he's got. And of course, Mildred reacts in the way we would expect Mildred to react. She screams, she tries to run away, she tries to burn some of them. Montag calms her down as much as you can calm her down, and basically says, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's try to read these and just see if there's something there. If not, we'll burn them, no big deal, and we'll move on with our lives. But as the chapter closes, we see these two sitting there, and it feels like the hound might be outside. Montag's making a statement about that, and Mildred's worried that Beatty's going to come back and burn their whole house. And there's this little bit of apprehension, but they're sitting there. It's raining outside, and as chapter 2 begins, we're going to see them trying to figure out how to read these things. So. All right, so your big thought as we leave this is looking at some of the comments that Beatty makes and seeing the ones that you kind of agree with, and but why is he wrong? I mean, I don't know how to explain this correctly. Like I said again, his premises are right, but why is it that he's wrong to do what they're doing? Okay, we shouldn't offend minorities. So do we just erase anything that might offend somebody? We should focus on unhappy. We should try to be happy the most we can, but does that mean we remove anything that makes people unhappy? Think about those big questions that we saw in there, and ponder those and think about how we should what role unhappiness or offensive things play in our culture. All right, and again, I want to stress that I don't find value in offending people on purpose. I just don't. But I do find value in truth. And there is truth when you look at, again, I'll talk about my profession with teachers. There are a lot of bad teachers out there. There are a lot of teachers that don't take their job seriously. There are a lot of teachers who are just trying to get a paycheck and get to the summer. And if the media or a TV show or a movie wants to talk about that, it doesn't offend me because I'm not one of those people. All right? So I think that's important. I mean, do I hate when people dog on my profession? Sure. But I also know who I am. I know what I'm about. And I'm very strong in that. So I don't let that dictate who I am. So anyway, that ends chapter 1, and over the week I'll start putting together videos for chapter 2. I've rushed to get these 5 out. I didn't do any editing. I didn't go back and reshoot a couple that I should have. I know I made some errors in this one and used names or ideas that were incorrect. Like I'd say Mildred when I meant Clarice or something. So I apologize for that. But I hope that these have been helpful. I hope that they've helped you answer the questions, and I hope that you've enjoyed this book so far. At this point, when I read it the first time, I was in love with this book. It's still one of my favorites, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. Most of my students listed up there as one of their favorite books, so I hope you'll be the same. All right, guys, enjoy the week. Relax, take some time for yourselves, but get all this work done too, and stay on top of your studies. All right. Thank you guys for taking the time to view these. I appreciate all of you.